welcome everybody to our session today here at SunCalp Forum. This is a session about social enterprises as creators of decent jobs with impact. And we have the question how to design impactful interventions. This is a session that is hosted by Siemens Stiftung, German-based Siemens Foundation, and we're very happy to welcome you all on board today. My name is Leonard Niemer. I'm the founder of Studio Niemer, and we've been partnering with Siemens Stiftung for quite some time. We had a big study, something that we're going to talk about in a minute as well. So today with me is Bastian Müller from Siemens Foundation, Siemens Stiftung. Bastian, we have the next slide. You can show both of us, and I would hand over to you in a second. Just to explain what will happen today. So in the first part, Bastian will share a few more insights into what we've been doing with our big study, what we are planning when it comes to job creation for social enterprises. And after that, we have a great panel discussion coming up. We have a great panel of experts joining us today, and we want to make this interactive as well. So you in the audience will have the opportunity to ask your questions in the chat later on, and we'll include them in our discussion. So with this, I would say, Bastian, if you're ready, I would hand over directly to you to share some insights of what we've been working on and what to expect.
Thank you so much, Leo, for the kind intro and for kicking it off. And for being our fantastic moderator today. Also very warm welcome from my side to everyone in the room. Thanks for taking the time, and we really will be looking forward to your input and questions during the session as well as later on. Also, I would really like to express my gratitude to the panelists, and we're very delighted to have such a high-level panel with very diverse perspectives and very deep insights, and I'm sure it's going to be a vibrant session and time will just fly by. My name is Bastian Müller. I'm from the Siemens Stiftung. Stiftung is a German word for foundation. So we're also doing a little bit of a German crash course here. And I have the great pleasure to set the scene a little bit before we jump into the panel discussion and to share a bit more insights into the work that actually has been going already since this year. Into the session and basically the journey that we're walking here, that this session is a part of. So let's jump right in. As Leo has said, the title of the session is really to discuss how social enterprises can be job creators on the African continent. And just looking at it from the perspective of the Siemens Stiftung. So social entrepreneurship always has been at the core of what we are doing since day one. On the one hand, we do support early stage social entrepreneurs in frontier markets all across the world through our Empowering People network, but we also engage in advocacy work, sector research, and really also contribute to the wider ecosystem, for example, like with this panel today. On top of that, we thought, what better way might there be to learn about social entrepreneurship than to actually be a social entrepreneur? So we actually founded our own social enterprise called Vetu, which is independent from the foundation in Kisumu, and it's a clean energy for productive use company. So we're really operationally active in the field of social entrepreneurship, support social enterprises, but also really work on the ecosystem side of things. What we have been planning today, looking a little bit at the objectives of this session is, and here I would like to go one step back before we jump to the very concrete objectives, is that I think without trying to sound dramatic, I guess a lot of you might agree that right now Africa is sort of at a tipping point with huge opportunities ahead for the next decade, but also quite steep barriers to really harvest the fruits for these opportunities. So just looking at the numbers, for example, by 2030, the working age population will be around 1 billion on the continent, and by 2050, Africa will represent around 20% of the whole world population. So this means really that, let's say, Africa's youth and its entrepreneurial spirit and their talents are really the biggest resource and assets that there are. But at the same time, we really need to make sure that we harvest those opportunities and we set the right things in place. So we do believe that in meeting those challenges, especially creating job opportunities for all these bright young Africans that will be joining the workforce in the future, which is a huge, huge task, that social enterprises can play a huge role in that. And I think also just looking at the COVID pandemic, it has become quite clear that we need enterprises that really also take care of vulnerable populations and that leave no one behind. So we do believe social enterprises can play an important part in that, next to, of course, other private sector players, the public sector, and so forth. So the objective of the session in a nutshell is really to elaborate on what are the key levers to drive and unlock the job creation potential of social enterprises, but also to take the discussion one step further and to really discuss concrete intervention areas and potential collaboration areas and tap into the potential there. And to see how we can take this forward, because this session is really part of a longer journey, and I will go into this a little bit more into detail later, where hopefully the research that we have done will lead into concrete actions, and I guess this is also how it's supposed to be. So one might ask, why are we focusing on social enterprises and not SMEs in general, or maybe large-scale industrialization? The reason is that we believe that social enterprises provide much more than just jobs. For example, they often provide income opportunities to neglected communities or to low-skilled labor. We also have seen that they have a very strong sense of responsibility for the employees and the families. And on top of that, they provide a lot of additional benefits. For example, they create social impact, providing essential services and goods to underserved communities, or they create environmental impact, which is becoming really, really important with, let's say, the time ticking bomb on climate change that we're sitting on. So long story short, we really believe that social enterprises are the enterprises of tomorrow. And that's why we have been focusing during our work and also in the study that I will be presenting in a second on social enterprises. And at this point, I'd also like to give a quick shout out to all the social entrepreneurs in the room and express my gratitude and appreciation for the hard work that you guys have been putting in over the last year when times were really tough, and for your persistence and keeping on going even when things were looking bleak. So thank you from my side, and we really appreciate the hard work that you have been doing, and we know how tough the situation is. So we mentioned that this is really part of a longer journey that we have been going. So this already started last year when we were doing research, which was commissioned by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, as well as the German Corporation for International Cooperation, which is the GIZ, where we created really a very, very deep study, which is split into three parts. On the one hand, you have a main report, which really looks into the job creation potential, the key barriers, as well as a broad set of recommendations. You have country profiles, and then we also have a micro-analysis, which involves case studies on 5 concrete enterprises. So if you are looking for some reading material these days, I think my colleague Aline will post the link to the study in the chat, and it also can be found on our website. When we were doing the research, obviously we had to put some kind of focus. So we picked out of the 54 countries on the huge African continent, 12 countries specifically, which, as you can see, are spread really from north to south, from west to east. And also the subset itself is quite a diverse subset. I mean, on the one hand, you have countries like Nigeria in there, have a population of around 200 million, and then maybe countries like Rwanda with 12 million. So there's really a huge diversity in there in terms of market size, also in terms of, let's say, the state of the entrepreneur ecosystem in these countries and the dominant industries in those countries. So we felt that we have, even though this is a sub-selection, that we have quite a diverse group here to look at. So long story short, what were our key findings? So without going too much into the methodology and the process behind this, and we're happy to talk more about this offline if you're really interested in this, because there's a lot to say about this. And we did a lot of data crunching. What we found is that currently the estimated direct jobs in social enterprises in those 12 selected countries stands around 4.4 million. And there is a potential to add 1 million additional new jobs by 2030 in only those 12 countries. So already 1 million additional jobs in one decade in those countries is quite a bit. But of course, we are aware of the limitations of such projections, given that social entrepreneurship is not a uniquely defined definition where you can easily find data on. And also, the COVID situation has been adding a little bit of uncertainty. In the past, many African countries actually have enjoyed quite good growth rates, which now have been declining due to COVID. But we took a quite conservative approach to the study because the 1 million jobs are actually formal jobs. And given that we all know that there's a significant number of jobs in the informal sector or in the supply chains or in the distribution chains in those social enterprises, the potential might even be larger. The big question is just, how do we harness that potential? So what we did is we basically took together the findings from the macro analysis, also the input that we got through the continuous expert validation that we did throughout the study, as well as the findings from the case studies with the 5 enterprises, which worked in different sectors. And then we came up with a very rich set of over 30 recommendations, which fall in 4 categories, which probably will not surprise you. On the one hand, financial support, technical support, enabling environment, and the data landscape. I will not go into so much detail into this right now because we have our expert panel here, and I'm sure they know much more about the specific interventions that might work than I do. But just to give you a little bit of an overview, the recommendations really range from smart ways of blending capital to addressing the talent gap for early stage social enterprises. Also, the policy side of things, for example, could you include social enterprises in public tenders? But then also recommendations to the academic side of things, how you could, for example, improve, let's say, the data quality and the consistency of the data on social enterprises, and doing some more in-depth research in specific topics like gender equality in social enterprises and so forth. But we will discuss some of those more in detail in the session, and you can always read them up in the study. So what's next? As I mentioned, there's a whole process behind this, which would I like to lay out very, very briefly for you, and then to show you where we also currently stand and where we want to go next. So we concluded the baseline research last year and really did a lot of data crunching, as I said, which then went into this publication. The next step was then really the dissemination and validation process. So we discussed the findings with various key stakeholders and various conferences to gather additional input. And the next step, or we're currently between step 2 and 3, and the next step would now really be to put some of those findings into action, and to develop together with partners together, because we believe strongly in collaboration, to develop concrete projects and interventions, which can be multi-stakeholder projects, which can be single stakeholder projects, and to put those projects and obviously into implementation. We're also considering building, besides that coalition of partners that working in the sector, of maybe building something like a project management office or a project hub that really makes sure that there's a lot of coordination, that we don't reinvent the wheel and so forth. And I'd like to zoom in here now a little bit on where we're currently standing. So we're at this super interesting position right now between now taking the findings into concrete projects, where on the one hand, we concluded the report dissemination and validation with some of our key partners and key conferences like GSTIC, Impact Engineered, the SunCloud Summit obviously here. And now we're entering the scoping phase, which is sort of the pre-phase before the project development. So we are talking to some of the key stakeholders that are active in the area of job creation through social enterprises, and really doing sort of an inventory or stock taking exercise to see what is there already and where is, let's say, the sweet spot for collaboration, and also where is maybe the untapped potential and where are the key levers. So we are in discussion with a broad range of partners. You see some of them on the slide, and this is an open process. So at this point, I also like to encourage you to really reach out to us if you are an intermediary, a foundation, accelerator, hub, bilateral organization that is really working on those topics, and you would like to learn more about what we're doing and what we're planning. Feel free to reach out to us. I think my colleague actually will share my email address in the chat. We're super open to have conversation with other partners, and we would appreciate, of course, as much input that we can get. So what I can say now is that at this point, really let's kick off the discussion and discuss how we can really join forces to enable social enterprises to create the jobs for tomorrow, because I think we all agree that we need a greener, more inclusive, more resilient, and more compassionate economy. And we all know that big challenges can only be tackled together. So we would love to do this together. And I would like to hand over at this point to our moderator, Leonard, to kick off the panel discussion.
Thanks a lot, Bastian. As you said, super exciting time now where we are in the process, and we're taking, let's say, a very pragmatic approach, also like an entrepreneurial approach, to see where the journey will lead us. Having discussions like this are, for us, a fundamental part of this journey, because it's really about bringing these stakeholders together. Bastian, you call it the scoping, also here now to find out where are the gaps, where are the opportunities, why do things work, why do things not work. I think that is really fundamental. And for this, super excited about our panel right now, and I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Karen Krieger. Karen, you're Chief Technical Advisor at the International Labour Organization. You're working on policy frameworks, policy recommendations for the social economy for South Africa. Super exciting topic. Warm welcome. Great to have you on board today. Then we have Dr. Frank Aswani. Frank, you are the CEO of AVPA, the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance. Funding and finance is always a big topic. Frank is where the money is. So he is kind of in charge of coordinating a network of social investors. And Frank, big topic that we're going to talk about today. Super excited to have you on board. And Bastian showed it before. We had our various conferences, GSTIC. So we had already the pleasure to welcome you at GSTIC in October. And we are very excited to continue the conversation today. Then we have Jareth Mbawara. Jareth, you're Tech for Development Advisor for Africa at Mercy Corps. Mercy Corps, as an NGO, is active in 18 countries in Africa, and you have a strong focus on how to leverage the potential of technology with a specific focus on youth unemployment. Super exciting topic to bring together digital advancements, technology advancements, and to see how can we actually tackle unemployment issues and create decent jobs, something that we're going to discuss today. Then we have Liana Enzapambema. Liana, you're the Senior Program Officer at the Segal Family Foundation. You're in charge of a social impact incubator in Rwanda. Bastian just mentioned Rwanda in his introduction, small country, but what can we basically take as learnings maybe from Rwanda also into other countries, other African countries? So warm welcome, everybody. Good to have you on board, and let's get the discussion started. We have a lot of people here as well, so just one comment before we jump right into the discussion. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat. I'll see where I will include this in our panel discussion. Make sure you come up with good questions for our panelists, and then we will include them in the discussion. So let's start with the big picture. Panelists, are you ready? Are you in a good mood? Thumbs up. Yeah, okay. Still a little bit skeptical, but no, I see you smiling. That's good. So let's get started. Big first question. Let's do a little bit of a status quo analysis. I think that's always good to look at the situation right now. When we look at the support ecosystem for social entrepreneurs, how well does it work when it comes to decent jobs? Like, where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities? How does this ecosystem look like right now? Big question. Frank, maybe you want to start first, but I want to hear this from all of you.
Yeah, Leonard, thank you. And thank you to Siemens, Bastian and team. Carola, thank you so much for hosting us today. This is a really pertinent topic on many fronts. I think, as Bastian in his opening slide stated, the role of social entrepreneurs and enterprises is not just about creating jobs, but also solving problems and plugging holes or market failure that come from governments being unable to deliver on their commitments to social investments and social services. But if we take a step back and just think about the continent of Africa, one of the biggest risks we face is the youth unemployment, because we just don't have enough jobs on the continent. We need to be creating 1 million jobs a year between now and 2030. So that's 12 million jobs a 1 million jobs a month between now and 2030. So that's 12 million jobs a year, roughly, if you go by the FDB numbers. And I think we're doing something like 3 million jobs a year instead of the 9. So massive job deficit as it is. The second thing, if you look at the problems that social enterprises and entrepreneurs are trying to solve, most of these have been solved through either government services or aid, but we're seeing some very worrying trends in that space. Aid to Africa is reducing. We've just done a study that we concluded end of last year, and we saw that aid, especially to countries like Southern Africa, was down by up to 20% in the last 5 years. And that means that there's less and less kind of grant capital coming into the social investment space to support especially the early stage of a lot of these enterprises. We're also seeing our governments are broke. We've borrowed a lot, so our public debt to GDP is growing on the continent quite extensively. So that's creating a bit of a problem on that end to just support the general solving of social challenges in the continent. So you look at all of these things, we're facing a huge space where we need a lot more entrepreneurs stepping in with social solutions to plug in some of these holes that are systemically being created, either through reduced aid or government not participating as much in, or being able to participate as much in social delivery. So there's a lot of stuff happening from a macro perspective, but also social enterprises are facing some really big challenges. Like any other SME, you know, the availability of the right type of capital at the right time of the life cycle is a problem. For many who are funding early stage businesses where we need a lot of grant capital, as we say, that's declining. And what that means that we're not getting enough of a pipeline out that can then qualify for loan capital. So there's always this problem we're hearing in Africa that there's more investable capital than we have investable deals and businesses. That's something we've got to fix. But at a macro level, those are some of the things I'm sure my fellow panelists will add to that.
Yeah, let's maybe hand over. Thanks a lot, Frank. Liana, what's your take on this? How do you see the ecosystem right now?
Sure, I will definitely, and thank you again for inviting us, on this panel, which is really, really timely. Social enterprise, it's interesting to see how it has become recently, the talk of the sector, but let's not forget that this is, something that is lived reality, by the majority on our continent, who cannot be employed in the public sector or, from our meager private sector. And just to add on to some points that Frank has already started mentioning, in terms of gaps, I could start with like perception, what I could call being perception. So what I mean by that is, think about, let's say, Stanford MBA students. They come out of school with startup capital, research and design, and some of, sort of are worried. These kinds of pay it forward are not often extended to African entrepreneurs. The friends and family are neither financially stable to support them with the capital needed to start. And available ecosystem only most of the time offers mismatching support. For instance, there is so much focus on training and skills building, as if the biggest challenge is skills. Yes, it's one of them, but how do we also look at other components that actually all come together to create a conducive environment for them? And yet we know that the difference between having a capacity and not having it is how much you can pay for it. Around the investors, the impact investment, for instance, there's also, a gap around the investors' commitment. The transaction cost is certainly high. Most investors and founders want to start with quite large size tickets, nothing below $500,000. Yet, how many startups in Africa do we know have secured, or managed $500,000 at their early stage? So they miss the opportunity in so many instances to meet entrepreneurs where they are. And maybe the third point that I could mention would be the regulatory framework, which is a challenge, but we also see a lot of governments creating or with the will to create actually a lot of legal framework to create that space where social enterprises can grow and scale. This is something that we see a lot in Rwanda, but also in other countries like South Africa and more. And I know my colleague will touch upon that. So all these are key reasons why entrepreneurs are failing to build successful businesses and social enterprises, which create more and decent jobs. If they struggle from from proving concepts to scaling their innovations, job will certainly be created at a lower pace. I will stop it here and let my colleagues touch more about the opportunities.
Thanks a lot, Liana. And maybe on one of the last points you mentioned, the regulatory framework. Karen, I think this would be great to hand over to you, how the situation is advancing. Frank, you mentioned governments are broke on the one hand side, but on the other side, there is some advancements. So how do you perceive this from an African perspective?
Thanks, and good afternoon, everyone from Johannesburg. It's rainy and there's a storm coming, so if it gets a little bit loud and thundery, that's why. My apologies. Always, these conversations are fantastic, and I think it's really good to connect the dots between our different country experiences. I just want to put a caveat out there. I am not speaking on behalf of the continent at all, and can only really draw on my experiences here in South Africa, trying to figure out what social entrepreneurship is and how we can mainstream it more effectively. So I think Liana's made a spot on points, and I think what I was thinking when Liana was speaking was just how much we advanced the conversation, and I think we need to acknowledge that, because we spent how many years talking about what is social entrepreneurship, why is it important, and we would go on and on and on those kind of motivators. And here we are very much talking about how do we make it happen. So I think, first of all, it's really important just to acknowledge the progress that has happened in the conversation, and that we're able to connect our different country learnings in a continental way that has meaning and relevance. So to build on those points, what's really exciting is I'm involved in developing the regulatory framework for the social and solidarity economy here in South Africa, which involves legislating for and naming and defining social enterprise. So that in itself has been a tricky process. What has been really interesting in that is that we've had to really tip our thinking upside down. And the first is that we can't impose our concepts of how the market should work on social enterprise and the broader social and solidarity economy. And this is because the mechanisms that underpin this economy are fundamentally different, in that what we're seeing is that trust and networks is the glue that holds these approaches to business and doing good together. And I think that's been really important for me, because it means that we have these very flash proposals around access to markets and how to connect social enterprises into supply chains. But actually what we need to learn from the social and solidarity economy, particularly in a country like mine, where trust is very low, and there's a growing gap of distrust between citizens and South Africans and people in South Africa and government. There's a lot that we can learn from the social and solidarity economy and social enterprises in terms of how we can run social, environmental, and economic value creation through trust systems. So I think that's an important point, is what can we learn from social enterprise? And the second point is, and I'll only stick to these 2 points because otherwise we could be here all evening and the storm will have come and gone, is very much around the legal structure. So my background is in social enterprise and championing social enterprise. And I came into this portfolio of work really going, we need a law. And what's been very interesting is we've had pushback against that, because laws are quite rigid structures. And what we see about social enterprise and the broader SSE is that these are entities that bridge informality and formality. This is really important because they draw that legitimacy from those trust networks that they run. And so I think long-term, we must keep the goal of legitimacy through a regulatory structure, but also look at other ways of enabling the social economy. And we can do that through kind of, we're talking about a proudly social South African trademark, for example. So I think, again, this then connects nicely into the financing structures, because you need to legitimize. Regulation is not the only way to legitimize. What else is it that we can do to bring legitimacy to the sector? So just very quickly in a wrap, what can we learn? Trust, networks, lots that we can learn. And how can we legitimize in other ways, in ways that are other than regulation? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Karen. I would say when we look fast forward into 2040, SunCalp 2040, I'll make a bet here. There's probably 2 topics we will discuss then as well: definitions and the funding gap, right? I think that's probably one thing that we will not solve by then. This is kind of an ongoing topic anyhow. And it's quite interesting then, what are the implications when it comes to policy, regulations, frameworks? How narrow do they have to be? How flexible will they have to be? Because the definition topic will over and over come up again. So that's something maybe we dive a little bit more into detail to learn from your experiences that you have now made in South Africa, and how can we potentially translate them into other countries then as well, so that they can learn from the experiences and the lessons learned that you have made. Initially, Frank, you mentioned the big topic of youth unemployment, and Jerry, there I would like to hand over to you, because that's one of the key topics that you're working on, and quite interesting, of course, how to use technology to tackle the problem of youth unemployment, a problem that is only expected to grow and become bigger in the future. Jerry, over to you.
Sure, thank you. And I agree with what all my panelists have said. And I think there's a big role for social enterprises in youth employment. We know that they're the biggest employer, at least in East Africa, where we've done most of our research. We know most people are employed in the 80% of the people are employed in the informal sector, and mostly by somebody who's trying to solve a social problem. And one of the interesting things we've learned about the ecosystem is that it's really a two-sided, piece of the coin. We really cannot talk about the social enterprise and the solutions that are coming and how they're triggering youth employment without talking about the demand side. And what we're seeing is an increasingly growing sophisticated consumer who knows exactly what they want, who's willing to pay for value, who has options because of exposure and because of technology. I know I'd love to buy local, I'd love to buy Kenyan, but if what I'm finding in Kenya is not quality, I have the option of leveraging technology to buy on Amazon and buy from another country or another continent. And that is something that social enterprises need to think about as they're solving everyday solutions, about the value, especially if their business model is really commercial. They have to know that it has to make value, even to the bottom of the pyramid. They're willing to pay if they can attach value to it. And that's what we are learning every day as we're trying to push technology, especially to more rural areas, to more rural consumers. We're seeing if they see the value of what the technology is bringing, that it's not technology for technology's sake. It's not just something that you're trying to sell to them that is fancy, but it's actually going to solve an actual problem that they have, that they're willing to pay for it. And of course, it comes with challenges. Technology comes with challenges, including the infrastructure challenges and network penetration challenges that we have in most African countries. But we've also seen that it's a high aspiration. When you talk, especially to rural consumers and more rural people, they know that these solutions exist. They know that there could be an app, there's a place that they can learn, better agriculture, smart agriculture, and they are actively seeking for it. They're actively seeking ways to, connect to the market better or get better solutions to their everyday problem. And it's just a matter of getting now the social entrepreneurs to tap into that growing market and to get solutions that make sense for a variety of consumers, knowing very well, of course, that, in each country, we're not homogeneous, we have varied needs. I know a lot of social entrepreneurs who are already thinking, how do we have a regional footprint? And that consumer knowledge of, how a Kenyan consumer differs from a Ugandan consumer becomes extremely important. And that's where we come in as a development organization in Mercy Corps, and I know very many other development organizations are actively supporting this social entrepreneur ecosystem by providing that consumer knowledge. We have a lot of market system development programming that is really helping more players understand the consumer, take technology to the people who are vulnerable and have been left behind. And, as everybody has said, that is progress. That is better, than what we're talking about 10 years ago. And we've made a lot of progress, and a lot of collaboration has been happening with government, with development actors, with investors, with social entrepreneurs. So I am really hopeful that in 2040, we will not be talking about the financial challenge. I am really hopeful that all the collaborations that have been happening in the last decade will really yield a lot of good fruits.
So that means you bet against this, Jareth. We have our personal bet. I say 2040, we meet again at SunCub. We'll talk about funding. You say no. So just keep that in mind. Countdown is on. Thanks a lot for the insights. I think this was a really good overview about the diversity of the field, the challenges, the gaps. Karen, as you said before, we're discussing these topics. For me, always the question is, what's next? How can we solve this? How can we progress? How can we get one step further? Jerry, you now mentioned that we made a lot of progress, but also Frank, from what I heard from you is there's some setbacks, right, when it comes to funding. So it's not just that way everything goes up in a linear way. We had some setbacks now. Aid money is on the decline for various reasons. I would like to shift towards the interventions. Like, what do we need? What types of interventions do we need? What types of interventions actually work when it comes to supporting social enterprises? And maybe one more sentence here to add, because Bastian mentioned the different recommendations that we had in our study. So we have our 4 pillars, but we also looked at 2 different aspects that we said we have recommendations that generally support the growth of social enterprises. Our assumption was if a social enterprise is strong, can grow, they will be able to create decent jobs. And then secondly, we said there will also be a set of recommendations specifically focusing on job creation. Market access, you now mentioned it, Jareth, as one of the important things. Social entrepreneurs need to make revenues. So I think there's a lot of area for improvement, but open question to you. What are the interventions? Maybe, Liana, I'll jump over to you and want to hear from all of you. What do you see as successful interventions?
So there are so many things that can definitely be done at different levels, but some of the things that I can mention, how are we incorporating in our education system, for instance, to start with those, elements around social entrepreneurship being, something that is taught onward. And those, of course, are long-term investment that we're going to see more outcome in the long run with graduates who are more equipped to actually run social enterprises, but also looking at some of the immediate, actions that can be made. How are we thinking about financing, as we keep talking about it, financing that makes sense to, those women who are running cooperatives and who need soft loans, maybe, to be able to sell their produce and reimburse quickly. But also, how are we looking at formalizing the informal jobs? And creating products and services. We see some, banks coming up and opting to make it their mission, such as, Equity Bank, for instance, the bank of small businesses, business owners, as they are known. On our side, it's, as a foundation, we actually operate, as a social enterprise ourselves, inspired by our our founder, Barry Siegel, who's been, we've been, supporting this space for over 10 years. We're solving a social problem, which is how African social entrepreneurs access capital, skills development, and networks they need to grow and scale their impact. And we use a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens to how we deploy capital, agile, blended, and long-term. And finally, using an ecosystem approach to create an opportunity for African social enterprises and driving opportunities, not just from Siegel Family Foundation, but from other like-minded funders and impact investors like AVPA, for instance. As we know, if you want to do it right, sustainably and effectively, that it takes more than one player but a village. So there are so many ways, different players can plug in, but these are the ones that I can share.
So maybe over to you, Frank. Where do the different players then plug in? Where is still a gap when it comes to this?
Yeah, so I think, and our answer is very much from a macro ecosystem perspective. I think we've got a couple of big gaps, and some of these lessons we can take from successful countries and regions that have made some good progress in this direction. So, for example, one of the places I'd love to start is that we've got to be deliberate about developing social entrepreneurs. They don't happen currently in Africa; they happen by chance. We need to have school programs that are actually deliberate about developing entrepreneurs. In a country where we're not, in a continent where we have almost 70% of the population under 25, we're not creating enough jobs. We have so many problems. If you're playing in the impact space, your best sandbox is Africa. There's no better place to be than in Africa. And we need to be taking advantage of these opportunities. The problems we have are huge opportunities for us to develop our young talent. So I think the first thing we've got to be being deliberate about. The enterprises will not happen by themselves. They need entrepreneurs. So I think that's the first thing. And have a program right from high school across. And there are a couple of programs we can emulate. There's the African Leadership Academy, for example. We can look at a program out of India called Lend a Hand. Today, I came across another program out of India called Magic Bus. There's a lot of these things. And Southeast Asia actually has some very interesting programs because they're solving very similar problems to us that we can just go and look and tweak. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing, we've got to create the right environment to help these entrepreneurs survive and thrive. And that environment is not just from a regulatory perspective, it's about access to capital. So over and above South Africa, Kenya is another country that's looking at a social enterprise policy. We're seeing an emergence on the continent on some countries adopting startup acts. So we've seen startup acts being looked at in Rwanda, Senegal, Tunisia. So we're starting to see some of that stuff happening. But access to finance, and when I talk about access to finance, is the right finance at the right time for the right enterprise. So we know a lot of our early stage businesses do require, when they're very risky, your mainstream investors won't look at them. And how do we avail the right type of grant capital that is more risk conscious to be available to those particular kind of people? But it's got to be available to those early stage businesses in a manner that is deliberate about making them investable and attractive to follow on capital. We've seen too many initiatives where grants are given to a lot of these enterprises without a real plan and a deliberate effort to make them graduate to attract the next level investor. So right now we're talking to quite a number of players who tell us, oh, we've been funding these 200 investees of ours with grants for the last 2 years, but none of them has transitioned to the next level. that is a failure that we need to be seeing change. So some of that stuff we've got to be deliberate. And one of the things we're doing at AVPA is trying to look at how we can support some of those initiatives. We're going to be looking at some programs to support some of those transition to investor readiness for a lot of our SMEs on the continent. The other thing we also must never ignore that it's not always about money. A lot of our enterprises need non-financial support. Just support with marketing, supporting with proper structures, talent, recruitment, all of that kind of stuff. The other people that we always assume know everything and are doing the right thing are investors. But actually, our investors need quite a bit of education. Because in this new paradigm where we're trying to crowd in private sector capital, we don't have enough money in the social space. We need to see how private sector can support investment to social investments. Our investors need to be more schooled on being on, for example, things like how to blend finance. How do you blend grant capital and private capital to increase that kind of thing? How do you maximize the various tools available, from anything from loan guarantees to social impact bonds that you can use across the spectrum? We need to see a lot more of our grant makers also become catalytic investors, provide some of the early stage risk capital. So we are also looking at an investor education program on innovative finance that will help them become a lot more astute in this new innovative financing space that requires them to play a slightly different role. And then I think that the final thing that we need to do is to think really differently about some other opportunities that are coming about. We've got the free trade agreement coming up. One of the problems we have in Africa is we're solving the same problem in 12, 13 different countries, but we hardly find scaled solutions. We're not deliberate about taking things that have worked in one place and seeing how can we take them across boundaries and across borders. So some of the things I think we need to do differently.
Thanks a lot, Frank. I mean, just to summarize some of the points and try to put them on point when it comes to, you're basically saying that education is key for 3 dimensions. On the funding side, so the investors, there's education that is fundamental. On the potential social entrepreneurs, like building really the pipeline of future social entrepreneurs. Maybe, Jerry, that's something that we can discuss when you tackle youth unemployment. Do you just tackle youth unemployment, or do you try to give it a twist by, let's say, creating and supporting new social entrepreneurs, not just any type of employment? Karen, that would also be something to talk about when we talk about decent jobs. What does it mean? It's not any kind of jobs out there. And third dimension of education, educating the customer. That's also something that we've been talking about. How can we make sure that they have access to the markets, that the customer actually understands this? So is education the key in all 3 dimensions? What do the others think about this? Jarius, would you agree? Would you disagree? Is that the big?
Oh, yes, I absolutely agree that there's a lot of education that needs to go on. And I think, and I will focus on the investor end, because I have been on the both ends of the spectrum, and there's a high perceived risk that makes investors not want to go full in, right? So that's why we have, a lot of money that is chasing very few deals. And people saying that there aren't enough good deals for investors. But the truth is that there's a lot of social enterprises. There's a lot of people who are coming up with really good, innovative ideas that don't get the funding they need to pilot them and test them out. And that's because there's this perception that, Africa is really high risk. And that's coming from the fact that we are a black hole when it comes to data. We are a black hole when it comes to, does anyone really know the consumer? Can you say with confidence, as you're selling your product to, you're selling your business, your social enterprise to investors, that you truly know, the trajectory that your business is going to go through and who's really your addressable market? Or if you are a Kenyan enterprise trying to scale up to Nigeria, how easy is it for you to, go and hit the ground running? We don't have enough data. We don't have enough research for anyone in the, both the social enterprise or the investor to be confident to put in big money, and the kind of big money we need, for social enterprises that are doing really well to start scaling. So, just underscoring the fact that we need more. And this is, research is really so costly to do. It's very cost intensive. And, most organizations who've tried to do it are either trying to do it so broadly across the entire continent that there isn't enough depth, or very specific to one category and not the other. So we need more. We need more collaboration to do more research, to get more people comfortable to put money into social enterprises.
What I find very interesting here, thanks for this, Jared, in our study, and Bastian has shown you the 4 pillars. One was on data. So there is, as you said, this black hole of data. And for us, it was really a challenge to come up with the estimations. We took also there a very pragmatic approach to say, okay, if we do not have the data, what is our best pragmatic approach to get to a possible estimate and then make it better? One thing I want to emphasize here is that we have a few recommendations on this to improve this, but frankly, there's not really an interest to put money into this. Like, you know, people want to fund the social entrepreneur, want to put money into the funds whatsoever. So how do we get out of this black hole of data? Anybody has an answer? Maybe Karen, you have any idea?
So if I can jump in, because I think we've made lots of mistakes in this space, and I'm very happy to share them. But I think, you know, Jared has said it perfectly, which is there's not enough information for governments to be able to draw conclusions that enable them to create a direction. And without a direction, we kind of sit in this muddle of like, what is social entrepreneurship? You know, and it can become like this black hole that doesn't move forward. And what we did from the beginning of the policy process, because there are a few things that hamper the growth of the social economy and social enterprise in particular. And the first is that I think we have a lot of Western views that are imposed on our kind of continental view, whatever that might be, without sufficient work being done to actually understand what our different country contexts, how social enterprise responds to our different country contexts, and what it means in our different country contexts. And part of why that is hard to pin down is that there are very few networks for people to engage with. So, for example, I came in with a mandate to develop a policy, but there was no lobbying group for me to directly connect with to say, this is what we think social enterprise is, and Karen, don't go down that rabbit hole. And so the consequence is that you can spend a lot of time jumping down the wrong rabbit holes, and when you surface for air, you've lost momentum. So the first thing that we did was to try and connect people to each other, because Jared said it very nicely that our space is a collaborative space. It's not a competitive space. And this in itself competes with mainstream economic thinking. So you already feel like you're swimming upstream. But there is an inherent collaborativeness to what we do. And I think we need to put a lot of effort into creating these networks and just connecting people to each other. And the second thing is that we then used every single opportunity that we had to gather data on the people that we were talking to. So for example, an event like this today, you've got, you know, I saw your very impressive database, that's 250 plus people on there, that's extraordinary. And what we did is that we asked 3 very simple questions. One of them you've already picked up on, which is, what do you want South Africa or your country? What do you want your country to look like in 2050? So that positioned the where do we want to go? Then it was like, you have a meeting with the president, what would you ask him? And that identified, well, what are the needs? And the third question is, what is it that you do that is important to your community and the people around you? And in that, we managed to get the social motivation. And just in those 3 very simple, quite coloristic questions, I don't know if that's a phrase, we were able to develop quite deep understanding of where social enterprises are operating, what they are working towards, and what their barriers are, because it's important to ask the barrier question without phrasing it as a need. You can't ask people what their needs are because everybody interprets it as funding. But actually, when we ask this question, those needs are phrased and framed very differently as access to resources. Frank said it beautifully. My infrastructure, I don't have a fence around my creche. They're empty buildings that government has. Why can't I use them as an advice center? So, and you open up a pathway as to how you can build collaborations between the social enterprise and government. And the second point then is going back to your point about research, is one of the mistakes that we made was not to engage with statistics early enough in this process. It's really good to carry and gather the qualitative data. It's important, but engage as soon as possible in gathering data and talking to your statistics agency as to how you can measure job creation, because that is, as Frank has been pushing, the primary focus for our continent. We need to get more young people transitioning from school to work. And you are only going to be able to achieve that if you can measure it. And so that would be my advice, is use as many opportunities as possible to gather data, do it in a friendly and accessible way, and engage with your stats agencies as soon as possible.
Does that also mean that we have to shift the discussion in general a little bit from funding as the big limiting factor to, let's say, the underlying foundation for social enterprises? I mean, you all highlighted over and over again the role of education, the role of infrastructure, and the role of data. Is that something that has to be more in the spotlight? Maybe Frank, over to you, because you're representing the funding side. Would you agree to this or not? Would you say, no, funding is the most important one?
No, not necessarily. No, I think it's never one thing. It's not that simple. Life is a lot more complicated than that. I think there's different things that need to be solved at different stages of the kind of the value chain of producing this pipeline of successful social enterprises. At a very early stage, I think we need to be thinking about how do we think about the reality that Africa is doing, because at the end of the day, we're doing these things with an end in mind. And whatever activity we're doing is a means to an end. And that end for us is to create opportunities for young people who can be actively applying their minds in solving the challenge that the continent is facing and move us forward broadly on many fronts. So I think we've got to tailor our intervention at different stages. And I think it's all about how do the different players who've got solutions come together and contribute towards a bigger solution that is required to make this space effective for more to thrive in.
Mute. So yeah, I mean, then the question back to all of you, how do they come together? Because Karen, that's something you mentioned. We need to have the networks, we need to have that exchange. It somehow implies that this is not happening in a way it should happen. How can we make this happen?
Is the question, how do we build networks?
Yeah, and how do we really make this happen
Okay.
for the stakeholders to come together to build these networks, to exchange on the best practices and lessons learned and the models?
Sure, Frank. Frank has been on this journey with me, so I'm looking at his square. Look, it's I think the most important. So one of the most important things that we've been able to do with the policy, and I think now that we're at the end of the process, is actually a very nice period to be able to look back and reflect, is that the policy isn't owned by this small team of people who have written it, right? Somehow we've been able to transition the ownership of the policy from the people, from the technical team, to the people who participated in the process. And we've done that because we've been able to create, it's probably not the right word or verb, but by bringing people together, you create a momentum for a policy and the ownership then shifts. So I think what's really important is that networks don't just happen. I'm going to steal from Frank. He used that word deliberate. You need to constantly have these kinds of engagements are so important. We often don't know how important they are until like 10 years time. We connect with each other. You have to be as transparent as you possibly can. Take this information exactly as you have and make it available to people so that they can get email addresses and talk to each other. You need to give feedback to people that the problems that they have, and they're often quite rural and isolated situations, that they're not alone. And I think the other critical thing about creating networks and momentums is that the process mustn't be scary. So if anyone here has read a policy document, they're really horrible things to read, right? The language is big words, it's dry, there's no visuals to explain core concepts. So we illustrated our green paper, which was in itself an interesting process for us to go through. We've translated it into multiple languages. You've got to make these processes accessible. But the best thing that we did was that we just got out of the city. And we used those collaborative networks with government, with NGOs. Social media is great for this. We posted and we said, we're coming. Please join our session. And then we workshopped with people what it is that they wanted from the policy. And it's incredible what just those connecting sessions can do. So to answer your question in terms of how do we create networks, it's a bit of a magic wand. It's a lot of and a few steps in a process that I think over time shift ownership of the conversation to the people rather than a small group of, I want to say elites, but I'm gonna explain why I say that, which is that I came from a business school background and I really thought I had a handle on the social enterprise conversation in South Africa. But when I went out into the field, when we did our consultations, I realized I had a handle on the urban conversation, which in South Africa is an elite conversation. And so it's really important to constantly step out and to never assume that you know, because as soon as you know, you don't know. And that's a mantra.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, networks don't just happen. Like, what are the things that help facilitate building networks? Maybe, Liana, your thoughts on this, because I think this is a interesting part of the discussion now. How do they actually happen? How do we make them happen?
No, I'm super excited about actually that component because, well, as a foundation, we operate with networks of social enterprises across 20 countries in Africa. But I will specifically talk about Rwanda, where we recently, worked as a network and lobbied, advocated for, a new company law that is now inclusive of social enterprise as a segment itself. So, just to say again, what Frank and Karen said, there has to be intentionality at how the network works together. Key players come together to say, this is what we want to achieve. This is a common goal that we have, and how do we actually do it together? One of the things that we are certainly still sort of like working on, and the government has been really been quite instrumental at coordinating certain spaces, is to say, how do we even create value for the enterprises, social enterprises that we have, for them not to move from one accelerator to the other and not necessarily moving or growing, but how do we look at who is at early stage, who is at the growth stage, who is supporting them at investment stage, for the network to actually create a clear pathways for those social enterprises to move from one point to the other as they grow. So there is a lot of opportunities for collaboration, as long as we know what we want to achieve as a network, and we are intentional actually making that happen. So it has been quite a successful case study that we've seen here in Rwanda, and that we certainly continue to see happening and contribute to.
Thanks a lot. Maybe Karen, over to you. One aspect that you mentioned about the elite players. I mean, there's two aspects, and I think I would like to jump back on this, and let's see if that makes sense what I say now. On the one hand, as I understood, somebody liked the discussion here. On the one hand side, as you said, they are probably sometimes then too detached from the reality on the ground. This is what I understood. Maybe on the second dimension, let's see if you guys agree or disagree. When we speak about these type of elite players in the scene, is the discussion then sometimes too formal? Would it need to be more pragmatic? Let's say in a way, reaching out to somebody, Frank, what are you actually doing? What are your plans? What are you doing next year? What can we do on top to get more into a pragmatic mode there? Is that something that is limited by being an elite player? How do you see this, Karen?
Sorry, me or for Frank? For Frank.
Maybe Karen, you go first, and then I ask Frank.
So I think the point around being part of the business school. So South Africa has this enormous inequality. And the thing is that universities, who I really believe have a critical role to play in broadening this conversation, are in of themselves kind of, I don't like the word elite, but I don't have a better phrase yet, but are of themselves kind of elitist institutions. So the people who network into them are already playing then in a space that is more established, or can be more established because of the fact that they're networking into the university. So when you're working in highly unequal contexts like mine, it's critical. And this is also very important for the point that Jareth is making around research. We can't build our understanding of something so contextual as social entrepreneurship if we just stay stuck in those networks. there's nothing wrong with those networks, but we've got to recognize that they're not the reality. And so this, for me, is why it's critically important to put so much effort and energy into pushing your boundaries of what you know. In our case, we can justify that because of our spatial inequality, but this inequality can happen across multiple dimensions. It's, you know, across gender, it's across inclusion in terms of disability. You know, inequality is multidimensional. So I think just from, I hope that maybe clarifies a bit that point. That's what I'm really trying to say, is that if you want to build networks, which we must do, that intentionality must be in building networks just outside of the mainstream and of what we know. Again, everything in social entrepreneurship, as soon as you think you know, you realize how much you don't know. And it's really that humility and that curiosity that comes with our learning in this conversation.
And I think it makes sense to frame it in a way as you did, the more established players. So it's not just an elite, but I think that point totally makes sense. And there's one comment here, Lisa, in the chat, you're saying the networks tend to operate much like silos. Is that something you would agree or disagree? Looking into the round, maybe Jareth, over to you.
Yeah, sure. And I think this is a challenge across, well, that has potentially been created by impact investment, and the fact that unfortunately social entrepreneurs are so obsessed with raising funding. Well, not obsessed, they have to spend so much time thinking about raising funding that they have to, like, the few who are glamorized are the ones who are in every panel, are the ones that are being sought by every investor, are the, you know, the donor darlings of everything. So they sort of, we've created a sense of, like, there's the elite social entrepreneurs who are either the first ones who got in and got it right, and or have the, you know, quote unquote sexiest solutions. And we have done that in expense of the less glamorized solutions that need to be, that are needed on the ground, that are needed by the people on the ground, but are not, you know, not everything can be sexy. Not everything needs to be, you know, very high tech in order to be exciting. And also, you know, just this focus on, you know, the low hanging fruits, right? So we have, as investors, as grant makers, we have really pushed entrepreneurs to have early results, to show traction very quickly. And that has incentivized them to have this urban focus. So I really understand what Karen is saying. Like, you can really know social enterprise from an urban focus just because that's where the funding, that will help, you know, the funding flow. And the harder to reach, you know, rural populations will be left behind and won't have, you know, solutions that are built for them. Just because as an investor, when I look at the numbers, the traction, you know, you've only reached a handful of people. Yes, it was hard to reach them, but, you know, I want numbers. I want to say, you know, with my funding, I was able to impact 1 million or create 1 million job opportunities in urban areas, right? But in rural areas, then that's probably a more impactful work opportunity. So I think it's, you know, just, and I think the conversation will even get worse because of the digital divide that technology is bringing, right? So if I have social enterprises that is really focused on technology, and there's so many challenges with, you know, reaching a more rural population, I will most likely have a really urban focused solution, right? And if we do not recalibrate how we are incentivizing social enterprise and say that we really, as impact investors, we really value that impact, right? It's really not just about the numbers that we are saying, or the revenue, or the, you know, the profit that we'll make out of this, that we really, truly, honestly value that impact, then we will incentivize the social enterprises to solve real challenges, and real challenges for the most vulnerable people who will otherwise would not have benefited from the solutions.
So many interesting aspects. I would like to stick to the one with the silos, and maybe over to you, Frank, first. How do we break the silos? And then, Jareth, I pick up another point for Liana as well. I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Leonard, that question of silos is very important, because I think, especially if we're going to build collaborative networks, and we've got to build networks around passion for us solving a problem, not passion for showcasing our solutions. The silos are brought about because we want to showcase what we are doing rather than rallying behind solving the problem. And the reality is our solutions are fluid. We're all very entrepreneurial. What worked today will not work tomorrow. So we should always be thinking about the solutions that we shall be bringing, and as new players coming into the space, they will forever bring in news. But if we're in there to solve a problem, you might actually find that by meeting someone you've never met before, they give you some input into a solution that makes it 10 times better because you work with them. Okay, but if your mindset is about your solution, then you'll be stuck in your solution, and that will be about it. You lose such a big opportunity to magnify your impact. And networks are there to magnify impact. They're there to make sure that as a collective, we're bigger than any of us. And I think I always say, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. That's what we as impact investors, players should be, social investors. We should be people who are passionate about the problem and recognize that this solution I have today, I'll hit a brick wall tomorrow. I won't give up because I'm still focused on the problem, and I'll navigate and find a new problem, a new solution. And that new solution might mean that I'm working with someone and partnering with someone. And we've seen, for example, for those of us who are ecosystem players and working at trying to break down the silos. So at AVPA, for example, we deliberately bring together deployers of grants, debt, and equity. They never exist on one platform anywhere else. If you look at elsewhere, philanthropists on their own, private equity funds on their own, but it's the blend of these different types of capital that Africa needs. And it's amazing how magic happens when they realize actually we're better off together than we are apart. And using platforms like our Dealshare platform, which really is about showcasing opportunities. We're deliberate about making sure that we show them the value of collaboration. So that's the role we as ecosystem players need to do. But I think it's very, very important that we fall in love with the problem and we build ecosystems around the problem, not so much our solutions.
And safe to say, I mean, problems we have quite a lot, not just in Africa, but globally. So there are a lot of challenges out there. And maybe, Frank, does that also mean a mindset shift when we think about these networks? And Karen, you mentioned it before, trust systems. Networks need to shift to become trust systems with a different mindset, where we not say, hey, we have all the solutions. Because one thing for sure is we don't have all the solutions. If we would have them all, the problems would not be there. But rather within the networks to acknowledge, well, we don't know. Like, we don't have the solution yet. People in the network, what do you think about this? How can we advance? That we need to have this open mindset of admitting that we still have the problem and not the solution yet. Could that be something that is changing the way we operate in networks? Maybe Frank, back to you first, and then want to hear from the others.
Yeah, absolutely. And realizing that we build on each other's experiences, we build on each other's faults, because also the mistakes we make are very important in informing how others in the network should not do the same processes or should learn from us. And I think that's what we really should be looking at. And networks are also not necessarily geographically in terms of proximity. We should be thinking about who else is solving a problem in the world that I'm struggling with. Okay, and that's why I keep saying, we need to think beyond. So we're very lucky to be part of an international sister network of organizations. So we have a network of organization in Asia, Latin America, and Europe. And we've particularly been deliberate and decided that this year we're going to work a lot closer with the Asians because they have very similar environments to ours. And we're learning a lot from them because they're probably 5-10 years ahead of us in solving some of these issues in a very similar space. So when you think networks, don't be limited by your boundaries, by your space, by your city, by your people speak your language. Think very broadly. Technology today has helped us to be able to cross boundaries we couldn't do before.
And I also hear that we need to speak more about failures. Liana said something that you would agree. Do we need to have a separate session on failures? Let's do it for SunCalc 2022. We'll have 1.5 hours just on failures and lessons learned. Is that something that would be important and help the sector, help the players speak more openly about things that go wrong?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's very important. Unfortunately, there is, if I may say, a lot of ego, in the founder space or impact investors to say, I want to do this better. And not taking time to learn from the mistakes that were done in the past and actually, build on what works and how can we do this together? I think it brings back the importance of the networks that we're talking about, and I really like that that you mentioned, including Frank. How are we looking beyond Africa? Because there is looking within Africa, but beyond. But even in Africa, we're talking about 54 countries with like different political economies and so much differences, but also things that we can learn from each other. So how are we creating space to know what has worked in South Africa or in Nigeria or in Kenya and tailor it to what works for us in our respective countries. But certainly back to the failure conversation, it feels like we have been like moving so fast, talking about social enterprises, talking about impact investors, and everybody is actually coming to Africa to say, this is the future, this is what we want to invest in. But then we are not, documenting, what's happening, and which brings back the research component. But also, how are we recalibrating, our expectations or our investments to make it work for the social enterprises that we are supporting.
Thanks a lot. And at this point, I see there's a big side discussion going on in our chat. So you're hijacking the chat, not just for Q&A, for putting the questions in, but having a good conversation. That's really good. Much appreciated. If you still have questions to our panel, please put them here in the chat, and we have another 10 minutes to go. We'll answer your questions and try to include them in the discussion. But I love that it's really interactive here. So way forward, I mean, that's for me the big question, like what are the key takeaways? What are things also maybe you take out of the discussion? What needs to be done? Some things that we can practically apply as the next steps, things that come to your mind. Maybe Jareth, over to you. Difficult question.
Yes. It's a difficult word. I think where I see right now, the big topic that is always on my mind on a daily basis is what technology is going to do and how do we best harness technology to ensure that we are future-proofing the continent. Not just that, we need to create so many work opportunities, but also the kind of the decency of the work, the quality of the work that, or the kind of jobs that we need to create for the future. We really need to be very, very deliberate about it now. And the time to create that platform and that foundation is really right now. The question of the digital divide and the risk of leaving a critical mass of the continent behind is real. As we are seeing, more people working online, working remotely, getting the technical skills, then we have to always ask what happens to the, our population that is already illiterate, that is already, already does not have access to this kind of infrastructure. And those are huge problems that social entrepreneurs need to be thinking about. So as we are thinking about social entrepreneurs as a solver of huge challenges, youth employment is a topic that is always left behind. We've created a whole network around fintech, around agri-tech, around WASH, around every social problem except youth employment. And because there's no clear definition of how youth employment will be built, right? There's no ecosystem that is working towards solving youth employment because, youth employment is so interlinked to, agriculture and water and, every aspect of our lives, every aspect of the economy. But they need to be really deliberate because we know that the future of work will need to look very different. Is something that I'm constantly thinking about, and a challenge I always like, to push to every social entrepreneur who's building around that. But also knowing the trigger points of social entrepreneurs as now employers. We did I ran a youth employment program the last 3 years that was focused on how do social an experiment of how technology will trigger job creation around social enterprises. And what we learned is by leveraging technology the right way, and of course with the ecosystem support and all the things that need to be put together, social entrepreneurs were able to increase the rate at which they employ for 4 times. And so this support that we are giving to social enterprises is the solution to youth employment, right? And it's about putting the various pieces together. I know there's a lot, I mean, we've been talking about collaboration and networks for so long, but I think there's need to be more smart about it. And we've all, identified the challenge of data. And that is one thing that I think across board, from an investor to a grant maker to a social enterprise, is a problem we are all facing, is a problem that if we all came together and channeled the data that we are pulling from different communities and different locations, we would actually build something that would actually push us forward. So I think that's a challenge I would throw to this network, to this panel, to everybody who's listening. Let's be more smart about our collaboration so we are actually moving the needle.
And maybe I'll hand over to Karen. Karen, with 3 questions here. First of all, Darius, from what you said, is youth unemployment the big neglected problem out there? Is that the big one? Secondly, can social enterprises fill the gap and tackle this in a more specific way? And then talking very concretely about ILO, is that something where you have a specific focus or could set a more specific focus in the future? Or would you say SMEs, SEs, we don't care? How do you see this?
Oh, gosh. Okay.
I come with the difficult questions at the end. So yeah, I kept them. So sorry.
This is when you should say, oh, we got 30 seconds left, Karen. You've got to be as quick as possible. Okay, ILO, so International Labour Organization, is the UN agency, the oldest UN agency. We had our centenary last year that focuses on, everybody knows the ILO labour statistics. If you're quoting labour statistics, chances are you've got a little citation there that goes ILO. But what people often don't know about is that the ILO, shortly after starting in 2019, set up what we now call ILO Co-op. So it's for 100 years, centenary was last year, I'm losing track of years. The centenary for our cooperative unit, this focus on the solidarity economy, I think really does demonstrate just how important these conversations are and how important they are to our global outlook in terms of what we want our humanitarian approach to our economic, social, and environmental structures to be. So I would encourage anybody to get in touch with the ILO. They've got a great website. We chair the UN Social and Solidarity Committee. So there's a lot of work happening in these spaces that's bringing people together. Your second question was, is young people into employment the critical issue of now? Well, I'm not going to be the person who says it's not, because I'm old. And for me, I look at how hard it is for people to transition from school to work. But this has been an ongoing conversation. When I was working in kind of what we term the HIV years in South Africa, this was still an issue. Like, how do we transition young people safely from the safe environment of school to work? And the fact of that transition is that it enables people to realize their potential. This isn't just about jobs. It's about people being able to realize their potential, to be able to sustain livelihoods, to dream, to take opportunity, and to be supported when they take risk. And so, yes, I think it is critical to support young people in that transition to adulthood, which employment is an important part of that. But at the same time, I completely agree with what Jareth says, is that there's a missing generation of people who have been left behind, and we must make sure that we don't continue to leave them behind just because they fall out of this kind of numbers mandate of when you hit the age of 35, then you're no longer considered to be young. What is the role of social enterprises? I'll be quick. I obviously am a champion for social enterprise and the broader social and solidarity economy. But I think what is truly critical here is not to lose sight of how important it is that we reframe our systems to be inclusive, and that the social economy and social enterprise is one mechanism that we need to accelerate to achieve inclusivity in our societies. And underpinning that inclusivity is this equal valuation of social, environmental, and economic returns, rather than favoring one over the other, which talks to the spectrum points that were being put in the chat box. I would like to end with a challenge to the impact investors, which is a very personal challenge, if I may. I'm being a bit cheeky here. But I actually had a discussion with my financial advisor the other day, and I asked, well, where does my pension fund money go? And I was told that it gets invested in big business, minerals, tobacco, et cetera, and I asked this question, well, please withdraw that and please invest it in environmental and social enterprises. And I've since posted this on Facebook and LinkedIn, and the issue that sits here is that there aren't any. There are no channels to investing through our pension mechanisms into environmental and social enterprises. And for me, here we have an opportunity to shift the system, because if it was easier for all of us who are employed to be able to invest our pension money in entities that we see as inclusive and sustainable, I think we could really accelerate these transitions to address the issues that you have flagged in this discussion. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Karen. That's another big topic. Yesterday, we had another event where we talked about the role of fintech and insurtech. And one thing that we're all aware of course, is banks have a lot of money that they then use for purposes that are not creating positive impact, rather negative impact. But the same is true for insurances and then also pension funds. These are kind of untapped, let's say, resources that we're not really looking into. Banks, kind of more obvious. Insurances, pension funds. Maybe one last question over there, Frank, is that the big untapped potential over to the insurances and pension funds?
There's plenty in there. And if you have time, please go to our website and read our landscape study. There's also diaspora. In some parts of Africa, there's diaspora remittances. There's faith-based money that's coming. There's some very unique types of capital that are very unique to Africa that we should be tapping into for greater impact. So the pension funds, definitely, because they're by far the biggest chunks of money, but there's some very unique things that I think we could, additional source of capital we could leverage. So yeah, absolutely. Pension funds, but faith-based, I think those of us who are over 40 grew up on the continent. You probably went to or were close to a Catholic school or a religious school, or went to a hospital that was run by missionaries. Some of that stuff doesn't happen anymore. And these churches are much richer today than they were in our days. So there is all that kind of stuff. But diaspora remittances are huge. In some countries, they're more than the GDP. So there's all that stuff we can tap into.
Thanks a lot, Frank. I'm looking at the time. We're coming to an end of our discussion, and I have a good news and a bad news. The good news is I have one more question, which is the same for all of you. The bad news is it's a difficult one. So I hope you're all ready for the final question. Karen, I see a little bit raised eyebrows. You're like, oh my God, what's coming up now? Fast forward, SunCalp 2040. We all agreed we'll meet again and discuss and continue the conversation, hopefully earlier. What's your wish for 2040? How does it look like then? Difficult question. Who wants to go first? Jana, you want to go first?
Since you would like to say you volunteered someone, so you're telling me, not volunteering me. Well, I would like to see social entrepreneurs being the one on this panel and actually talking about their journeys and what they've learned, and educate us even more as impact investors and policymakers and everybody who's making different decisions that is affecting in a way or another the way they do their businesses. So we want to see the social enterprises we're advocating for today, we're supporting today, being at a level where they are creating more jobs, of course, but also being the ones leading this conversation to talk more in practical ways how it's working, it's happening, and what they want to see happening.
Great, thank you very much. Jareth, over to you. Voluntold, that's how you called it, Jana?
That's a tough one. Well, I hope we will be saying that our target for job creation is much smaller, that we're trying to create the gap of jobs that need to be created will be much smaller. I hope that we'll be talking about the conversation will go more towards the decency of the job or the pay package and the compensation package, as opposed to I just need a job, any job. Because I think that, and COVID-19 has exposed that you can have a job, but if it's not a good job, it's a job that doesn't have social security, then the vulnerabilities that come around that are really dire. So I really hope that the youth employment conversation will have shifted less from numbers and more towards quality.
Thank you very much. Volunteering question, so no voluntold. Who wants to go next? Frank, Karen?
Let me go next. So I'd love, in essence, what we're talking about is we're trying to change how, in many ways, business is done on the continent, how the values that business adopts on the continent to be more socially conscious and socially impactful. I'm hoping in 2040, we'll have mainstream corporates speaking like social enterprises from a values and principles perspective, measuring their performance from not just their financial performance, but being very deliberate about their social impact performance as well.
And maybe this is where we can bridge your both wishes, Liana and Frank. So in 2040, we will have social enterprise corporates sitting here, the big ones, social entrepreneurs who created big corporates run as a social enterprise. This would be my wish then. I was hijacking this. Karen, over to you. Final words then here. What's your wish?
Yeah, thanks everybody. It's been a great discussion. I appreciate everyone's time. Just quickly, I would hope that it's a collaborative rather than a competitive economy or system where the equal value is given to social, environmental, and economic returns.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. That has been a wonderful panel, great discussion. I really enjoyed it. Lots of insights also to everybody who contributed and had the discussion here in the chat. Bastian, you're coming back on the stage. We're coming to an end of our session. So I would say thanks again and hand over to you for the final words.
Thank you so much. I mean, first of all, thanks to the panelists. I think it was a really fabulous discussion. I really enjoyed that you talked like a lot from personal experience, and there was a lot of self-reflection in the room. I felt also critical thinking on what the sector can do better. So I really appreciate that. Thanks, Leo, for really walking us really smoothly through the session. Karen, good luck with reallocating your portfolio. Maybe you can give him some links to ESG funds. And as it was said many times, and also just a few seconds ago, we would like this to be a collaboration. We see ourselves as a convener and as someone who really works together in a collaborative spirit. So this will not be the end of the discussion, and we would love to follow on conversations with everyone in the panel, but also, as mentioned, everyone in the audience who is sort of active in the space, feel free to reach out to us. I really enjoyed the talk. I wish you all a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of SunCal.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.